Coming up today on Locked On Texas Tech, Buc-ee's, Slim Jim, Chimmy's, Allstate Insurance, the Southwest Conference, and Shiner Bock Beer.
You are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Great to be with you again on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, always free and available on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. And as always, appreciate being your first listen with the only Chris Level. I'm Casey Cowan. Chris, great to be back with you. Wrapping up the week as we dive in to a Father's Day weekend. Happy Father's Day weekend to all the fathers out there in the audience. And I guess we'll do it, Chris, with a conversation that may have sort of been like floating out there in the ether. We've talked about one aspect of it as it relates to private equity involvement. But to wrap up the week, there was quite a bit of news otherwise for the Big 12 Conference. As you might have seen yesterday, some thoughts of a potentially lucrative naming rights opportunity for the league also. So a whole lot of things to consider that we want to get into with you today. And I say that, at least I didn't really see it necessarily coming, but maybe it's been out there all along as we kind of look back to, well, some stuff we've talked about with Brett Yormark and his outside the box sort of thinking. And so maybe it shouldn't be that much of a surprise that these types of possibilities are out there.
Everything's for sale, including the name of your league, or whatever other term they want to call it. And we talked about this, I don't know, a week or two ago, and I think Brett Yormark was quoted as saying, "We remain open for business. We've never been more open for business than we are now." And we wanted to connect some dots on expansion. And that's all we always want to jump to those conclusions, because that's really the world we've operated in the last, 14, 15 years. I wonder if this is what he was really hinting at, because I think that these conversations are far down the road. They didn't just pop up out of nowhere. This is a two-part conversation, because this is a naming rights situation, and there's a private equity conversation, and they are separate, but the sentiment is the same, in that we're trying to generate more revenue for each institution involved in the Big 12. People are kind of having a field day with the naming thing and kind of having some fun with it, right? I'm not triggered. There was probably a time when it would have bothered me, the traditionalist. There is no tradition anymore, people. That's just gone. I mean, it just is. There's no natural rivalries anymore. This is survival. This is trying to remain relevant. And there's not ever been a time where college athletics won't take the money. And if there is an example of that, I'd love to hear it, but I can't, and maybe there is, but I just can't think of one in the last 10 years, as everybody's been, doing what's best for them. And Calvin, you and I we can still call it the Big 12. I mean, I don't know if anybody can force us. I mean, we're not getting any money from Allstate or whoever. Right. So we can, for simplicity's sake, we can still call it the Big 12, but if this helps everybody out, I don't care what they call it. I mean, would I prefer it to be smooth or not hokey or whatever? Sure. But I'll probably still refer to it as the Big 12. Anyways, it's been hard enough for me to switch from Power 5 to now Power 4, that industry jargon. So whatever, man. And since we're on the subject, really, it should be insert company name 16 while we're changing stuff, right?
That was the only thing that I was kind of thinking yesterday. Like, okay, if we're going to get into a big change, do you think maybe we should go ahead and dive into reflecting the actual number of teams in the league, which I know these things can change very quickly, so maybe difficult to even commit to a number, ever. But there was some pretty good stuff out there yesterday. The Allsips 12, the Allstate 12, the Buc-ee's 12.
What a 12 from Whataburger. I mean, yeah.
What a 12. I think my favorite was when someone tried to pair Southwest Airlines with the league, and they said, just follow me in this Southwest Conference, which I don't know. It's got a certain ring to it. Maybe too wild to try. But if you did not see some of the numbers, man, they were kind of staggering. And I don't know, of course, all how this would be divvied out or from a member institution standpoint, what it really means for your number at the end of the day. But some reports indicating that it could be worth between $30 to $50 million annually for the league. Again, what that actually means for Texas Tech, probably yet to be determined, but something I want to get to you when we wrap up, get to with you. There we go. When we wrap up the conversation today, Chris, is, also reporting about how this could close a gap to a degree financially between the Big 12 conference and, say, the Big 10 and the SEC. Now, there are a whole lot of other questions I have that I'll get to coming up in just a moment, but I don't blame Brett Yormark at all or the league for trying to do this. And I guess from a sentimentality standpoint, as you were talking about tradition and things like that, the veil has been pulled back. And in a lot of ways, I'm actually very grateful for that as a fan, to just kind of see some of how the sausage is made, I suppose. But I'm sure that there will be some who are not enjoying that perspective.
Yeah, and what is this company actually buying? I mean, how much rebranding are we talking about? I mean, on jerseys, on fields, what are they getting for 30 to 50 million a year? And essentially, to answer your question, I think what it means is that you take that 30 to 50 million and you're going to divide it 17 ways. I mean, every member institution gets a cut, and then so does the conference office, and that's kind of, so it's dumbed down. It's basically somewhere between another, $1.5 million to $3 million a year, depending on the number that they settle on, I guess, give or take. And I mean, Kansas State just bought a power forward for $2 million, so I guess everybody can get a power forward for basketball with this extra naming rights deal. I don't know. I wonder too, is there clauses in here to where said company has to have these same questions about the private equity conversation as well, because the conversation is the same because they're linked, because it's money. But does this increase the chances for expansion, or does it theoretically kind of stop it? I mean, in other words, are there clauses built into these contracts to say if we expand to 17 and 18 teams or to 20 teams, do they get the same, does the company at that point add to the pot, and so everybody's cut stays the same, or just how would that work is certainly something that I was curious about. It's really not a ton of extra money in the scope of things, but I mean, it's not insignificant either, depending on what they settle on. And I'm curious if Allstate is clearly the front runner. Was this a trial balloon floated to try to get those folks that had been talked to about this?
Yeah.
Hey, we're getting further down the road and trying to enhance the situation. I don't know. Only Brett Yormark and the folks involved can ultimately answer those questions. But I kind of am resigned to the fact that this is just stuff that's going to continue to happen, because here's why I ask about what did they buy. That 12, that Roman numeral 12, is on everybody's jersey sleeve. It's on everybody's coach's polo. It's on everything branded, like when you're standing on the sideline or on their jerseys or whatever. And are you going to have to change that? And if so, is that did they buy the rights to basically put the State Farm? I'm asking aloud. I just don't know what all it comes with, which are similar to what I have on the private equity conversation too. But again, you're trying to remain relevant. Brett Yormark is doing his job. He was tasked with one function, and that is to generate as much revenue as he possibly could. And he's basically saying, okay, here you go. Here's, this is what we're having to give up, but this is what you get. And then I've also got some other things I'd like to talk to you about too, folks in the room. And so, I mean, he's bringing, ideas and being outside the box and doing something that had never been done before, and he's doing his job. It's up to the members to go, well, we wanted more revenue, but not in this way. Can you go back to the drawing board? So I don't know. That's where they're going to have to decide all those things.
Let's get to the private equity angle on this, which we touched on a previous episode. I don't know, maybe a week and a half, 2 weeks ago or so. And I don't want to get too far in the weeds because I know it's not the easiest thing to really process or grasp. One of those things added to the list now that, just growing up, say, as a football fan, maybe you didn't know you needed to consider private equity. So I don't want to go too far and get too far out over my skis, obviously, but it does seem like this is advancing fairly rapidly, at least from the Big 12's perspective. Am I wrong, or what are you seeing on this front, Chris?
First, today's episode brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. And when you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. And that's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. And LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. Gives you access to professionals you can't find anywhere else, and it does it all while making the process easy and intuitive. Hiring is easy when you have that many quality candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within only 24 hours. LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make the process easier. They even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even easier and quicker. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free today. Terms and conditions apply.
Do you know where Luxembourg is?
Is that somewhere out around Spade or Anton? I can't recall.
No. It's Europe's seventh smallest country, but I guess they have a money factory there that is in charge of billions of dollars.
Yeah.
So that's where I guess this private equity firm that is interested is based. This is these two words have been in the college athletics conversation for the last year plus, I guess, at least publicly, maybe privately it was longer than that. But we had Saudi Arabia kind of with Live Golf and all that kind of flirting around, and were they going to get involved? We have the Florida State situation where they'll just take money from private equity, and that's what they'll use to buy their way out of the ACC and all these things. And now here we have a league that's willing to sell off potentially as much as a fifth of their stake to a private equity firm in exchange for immediate cash on hand. So private equity is a dirty term to a lot of folks out there because of how heartless they can operate. They're simply in typical frame. They're only interested in profits. They squeeze until they get those profits. It's all about efficiency. Products and services kind of lose their nice touch or their customer service or all the things that some people like about them, because private equity is like, no, we don't need all that. We want profit. That's all we're interested in. And so I don't know, like my question with this is, this is a significant amount of dollars, much more than what the naming rights to the conference would come with. What are they buying? That's my biggest question. What do they, similar to the naming rights, what do they get with that? Private equity, typically, when you give up ownership, you typically, in most cases, you give up control. And so is this, are we talking about these folks now have a say-so in conference business? Do they get to have a vote? Do they get to say thumbs up, thumbs down? Hey, you need to raise ticket prices. Hey, you need to cut your cross-country track team because it's a money suck. I don't. The grasp of this is fascinating. One could also argue that the schools are interested in something like this because it could preserve all your Olympic sports. Like while we have been talking about having to cut sports or having to just say, hey, man, I don't know what the future is of some of these quote unquote Olympic sports in the coming years. This could be their way of going, we now can say without, we're good. Like these sports are going to stay. And I don't know what that's worth to everybody, but because you're not hearing those conversations really with the Big Ten and the SEC, you're hearing that with a lot of the other folks, because they're going to continue to operate business as usual, but you're not necessarily going to be able to. So, because these firms, they don't just hand you the money and go, hey man, have fun, good luck,
enjoy.
We'll talk to you. Yeah. That's right. They want a return. And I think what they're gambling on is that this is an appreciating asset that Brett Yormark and I don't know where this is coming from, but a lot of the stories that were written, there was a lot of conversation about the Big 12, and I'm going to guess this is either TV folks or Yormark or a combination of, feel like that their media deal that they just signed, which was a surprise to a lot, is still very undervalued. The private equity firm may feel like they agree with that sentiment, and that the next time it comes up, which that's why he wanted to sign a shorter term deal, because the next time it comes up with all these streaming services and all the potential players in here, they could really cash in at that point. And I think that's what the private equity firm is basing it on. We think they will get a lot more money, and we want some of it. But how long is this? Is this forever? Is this, does it affect expansion? How much say-so are they acquiring into your everyday business? If you say no to this, are you going to piss Brett Yormark off to where he's like, folks, you tasked me with this. I'm giving it to you. If you say no, I've done all I can. I'm out. I'm going to go, try to build up something else. My mind went all over the place with this deal. As you can tell by my text messages to you yesterday, I'm like, I really can't grasp this concept just yet, but these are some of the things rattling around in Chris Lovell's brain anyway.
Yeah. So Brett Yormark could be frustrated if maybe some of the opportunities he's presenting are not taken advantage of. And he says, trust me, I will pull this conference over right now, and I'll let Dan Beebe drive. You want me to call Dan? I got Dan's phone number. You want me to call Dan? And nobody wants that. You touched on one thing that I wanted to hit on to kind of wrap up this portion of the conversation, and that is power and influence, and in the form of voting power or say-so power, because they're going to have a seat, obviously, at the voting table. What percentage that commands of the vote, I'm not quite sure. But obviously, when you take a chunk away from member institutions, Chris, it could be really interesting to see, like, what faction of member institutions or what number of member institutions is like throwing in with the equity guy, because the equities guy is like, hey, this is what I want, so let's make it a sweetheart deal for us. And then you've got this other faction that's not wanting that. I don't even know what to expect in that regard, other than obviously they're going to have a say-so. They're going to have influence to wield within the conference's decision-making process. Is that 25%? Is that 30% of the vote? Is it 10% of the vote? I don't actually know, but they're going to be at the table, right? Am I thinking about that correctly?
And that's what when you talk about the leadership, because I think there's a lot more. I've talked to enough people. There's not a lot of apprehension about the naming rights to the league. I think that's a no-brainer. Yeah. It's a much smaller. I would be curious with that one going back a little bit. And with what we're talking about now, like the terms, like in length, the naming rights deal, you're going to sign a 5-year deal, an 8-year deal, a 10-year deal. I'm not exactly sure. In some ways, I hope that you don't sign something too short term, because then you don't want to switch the name up of your league all the time,
like a baseball stadium or something. Just
that's where it gets kind of hokey. Yeah. And how often do you actually call those stadiums?
Never.
Yeah, it's crazy. But I guess there's enough of these companies and marketing firms and third party, folks that consult, that feel like it's still worth it because everybody's still doing it. Bowl games and stadium rights and all that kind of stuff.
It's branded. It's on the building. It's on the television graphic or whatever. The announcers are probably saying it. If you are on, I guess, that institution or that team's payroll, if you're Brad Sham of the Dallas Cowboys, I bet you call it AT&T Stadium. If you're Locked On Cowboys, you may call it Jerry World or whatever you want to.
Or the Jones versus Jones AT&T.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I remember back being on the flagship station for Texas Tech, and there was an instruction that we wanted to include AT&T within Jones Stadium. So it was kind of a transition. I don't care about it now. I say the Jones or Jones Stadium. But I think among the common fan, obviously it's not something necessarily that you're going to be using within your lexicon, but it's probably in your head that it is called that. And I guess that branding is worth it. But the contrast that you're kind of describing there is that AT&T, I don't think, just because they sponsored Jones AT&T Stadium, if Texas Tech is thinking about moving to another conference, I don't think AT&T has a vote on the Board of Regents or anything like to say, well, no or yes, unlike the private equity holders would have within a conference's decision-making, right? I mean, I think that's the way it would go. It wouldn't be like all states in there like, we don't want to do this with the league. You just sponsor the name. But if you're private equity involved in the conference, then you're going to have, I think, a portion of decision-making power.
Well, and that's what I'd be willing to bet you that that's what a lot of the leadership, the board, the leadership, the figureheads that can make these decisions on behalf of the league, that the devil's in the details.
Yeah.
What are they acquiring? And with that, what do they get? How much say-so do they get? Are they and are involved in our everyday business? Is this, here's this money. At the end of the day, we want this percentage of your revenue off the top, and we will leave you alone to do your business. I mean, I don't, it's somewhere in between there. I just don't know what it looks like. And are they just wanting money out of the next TV deal? And then, okay, now we're done with each other? Or is this a permanent situation? I just don't know what exactly, and then if I'm the league, I would want to make sure that that Luxembourg can't, say, you know what, we're going to sell off our portion here. We're going to let somebody else deal with this. We're done. I mean, then you get into business with somebody that you didn't originally think you were, so there's just lots of questions, and
there's going to be like layoffs. I'm sorry, Cincinnati, you've been fired.
Yeah. I mean, the magnitude here, and then at the end of the day, Cowan, what we have to ask ourselves is, what are you doing with this extra money? If you go through with these kinds of deals, what are you doing with this extra money? Is it just because the private equity part, if what was reported, it gets you, from somewhere into the $40 or $50 million per year into the $75 million per year, which is what the Big Ten is getting. Is this more NIL money? Is this, I can now pay my coaches better and trickles on down so they don't leave for example, the Tennessee job when you lose your softball coach? There's a trickle down effect. I just don't know where all this extra money would be going. And then how long does it last? I mean, like how long, what kind of commitment are we getting here? Is this short term? Is this forever? Is this
right?
I don't know. And if it works, I can envision a scenario to where other leagues do this as well, and then maybe other leagues are worth potentially more, and then you really close the gap, or you still chase.
That's the question I wanted to ask to wrap up our convo, because there was in some of the reporting this week, an indication like if the Big 12 did this, then obviously they'd be this much closer monetarily to the Big Ten or the SEC. And so the first thing I'm thinking, like I'm sure a lot of folks is, well, why wouldn't they do this also? And then just, again, increase the gap. But I guess the answer to that is, or at least the speculative answer is, that maybe they would not want to do this because they wouldn't feel like they had to. I kind of find that hard to believe, though, Chris, because if you saw the Big 12 really stacking chips, I don't think that I just don't view the leadership of the Big Ten or the SEC or really anyone as saying, well, we have enough. We don't need to go that route. We've got plenty. Now, maybe the tradition or the air about them, they're too proud to do that kind of thing. I have no idea. But do you really think sustainably, like, you could close a gap and it would remain that way? What did you think about that aspect of it?
Again, I just don't know of too many situations to where any of these in the college athletic space that leagues or the NCAA or whatever has turned down money
Right.
when it's presented to them. The question really just becomes what is this firm acquiring when they have a 20% or 15% stake of your league?
Yeah.
And that's where the the SEC or the Big Tens, that's where they're going to go, well, it's not worth it. We don't need it. If we have to give up this or that, or they get to come in and say, here's what you're doing, or here's who you're going to sign a media rights deal with, or here's when you're going to play your games. I don't know. Whatever your everyday business looks like, if they start coming in and pointing and saying, because I just don't think that some of these folks are interested in that. And maybe that's not what this comes with. I really just don't know. And maybe it's just a straight up gamble. Hey, we just want to cut off of your next TV deal, and we're gambling on you, and we think that you are undervalued. We think that you are going to get a lot more money because Brett Yormark is clearly, Kirby Hocutt is said disruptor to me. That's what he is.
Yeah.
He's been tasked with this. He's doing his job. And if it doesn't go well, is he even around? And if they agree to it, is he even around to deal with the conseconsequences? That's a
great question. Also, a whole lot to consider. I'm kind of just envisioning in my head as you're describing those things, like a Saudi prince or something telling the SEC the Iron Bowl will be played for my son's 16th birthday party overseas this time around. You perform for me.
Hey, this is what they do with Live Golf. They're in business with the WWE. Yeah. They have thrown a ton of money to a variety of sports and things like that. So I'm with you. Keep in mind, this is a bit of a different deal, but you're going to play a football game in Ireland. Farmageddon.
That's true.
Is going to be played in Ireland next year. And each institution is getting, I think, a couple of mil to do it. Yeah. So I don't know.
Stranger things have happened, I guess. Maybe my description or my example is not all that extreme. All right, some really interesting things to ponder with regard to the future of this league as we leave the week. Chris, appreciate your time and the insight as always, man. Enjoyed it.
Our heads are spinning. We're trying to make that money. But to hope everybody enjoys the weekend. And like Cowan said, man, happy Father's Day to all the dads out there. It's a very important role. I know you and I take it extremely seriously. I always am just calm and totally rational with my two children, and I know they appreciate me for that. I'm kidding, kinda. But yeah, keep hope alive out there, everybody. Enjoy the weekend, and we'll talk to you next time.
So far my child has not learned to form like schemes against me or even like sentences that speak out against me. So I'm just trying to keep in mind that it won't be that way forever and to enjoy some of the time I have right now. And also keeping in mind an Andy Griffith episode where he told Opie, and to think I was proud the day that you learned to talk. So nothing stays the same forever, but happy Father's Day to everybody celebrating that this weekend. And thanks for joining us as always on Locked On Texas Tech. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. And of course, the best way to help us grow the show is to comment anything below. For Chris, I'm Casey. We hope to see you back for the next round on Locked On Texas Tech.